BITSS is a network of researchers, individuals, and institutions that are interested in promoting scientific integrity across the social sciences. That's really our mission. It's a network that's been growing very quickly. So there's 150 affiliated individuals and institutions at this point. And there's a couple things that I think set us apart, are really distinctive about the network. The first is it's a grassroots researchers, members of the research community who are trying to shape research practices within our communities. And I think that's a really fundamental thing about who we are. We're also a diverse network. There's affiliates across social science fields, from economics, my field, to political science, psychology, biostatistics, public policy experts. And it's really the sort of discussions and cross-fertilizations across these disciplines that I think make BITSS such an interesting meeting point. I think what we've learned in the last couple of years of meetings is the disciplines. We can learn a lot by figuring out what best practices are in the different disciplines and what the key issues and trends are in our disciplines, and trying to bring them into our own fields. A third characteristic of BITSS that I think is important really to emphasize up front is just how global the network has become. So there are folks who have flown here from abroad. We have a colleague from Nairobi who's flown in. I think that is really a great dimension of the network. In our some of our training activities, we had students and postdocs from 5 continents at the training activities. Where BITSS falls in the ecosystem and the partnerships, BITSS is really a meeting ground for different organizations and individuals from different fields. You can see many of the organizations that are taking the lead in promoting transparency and reproducibility here on the screen. And we're partnering with these organizations on a whole bunch of different activities that I'll just mention, I'll talk about briefly. And I think the fact that BITSS is interdisciplinary and has a goal of being an intellectual crossroads and meeting point allows us to bring partners together in new ways. And I do want to acknowledge up front that a number of our partners are helping to sponsor and fund this meeting here today, including the Center for Open Science, the Berkeley Institute for Data Science and the D-Lab, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, and the Laura and John Arnold Foundation as well. So let me just tell you a little bit about our mission, and I think it'll help to make sense of the discussion this afternoon and the sort of broader activities around this 2-day meeting. This morning there was a great research workshop led by BITSS, Center for Open Science, and D-Lab staff teaching and discussing the latest tools in transparency. We have this really exciting session today, and I'm really looking forward to introducing some of our speakers. And then tomorrow we have a research seminar where we're going to get into really the latest research in the field of research transparency in an interactive way. So it's a really exciting couple days. Our goal our mission really comes in three pieces. The first piece of BITSS's mission is to raise awareness about issues of transparency and raise awareness about some of the weaknesses in current practices. Even though a lot of us here are engaged in these issues and there's been a lot of movement in the area of research transparency, there's still very large numbers of colleagues and pockets and sub-communities of researchers where these issues still haven't gotten much traction. So we still have a lot of work to do to get the word out about some of the challenges and problems and change the conversation. BITSS has been making progress in raising awareness a few different ways. BITSS affiliates have been writing for scientific journals and disciplinary journals to emphasize just how important these issues are. We've been generating popular media coverage around these issues, often following on the scientific publications. And BITSS has also been sponsoring sessions at professional association meetings and other conferences over the last couple of years in, at this point, I think 4 or 5 different disciplines. And those sessions are opportunities for us to raise awareness and highlight some of these key issues in different research communities. A second part of BITSS's mission has to do with identifying the way forward, figuring out where we can build consensus in the research community around these issues, identifying better practices for solving challenges in the field, and also sometimes developing software tools to solve problems. One of the key aspects of our activity in this area has been the BITSS blog at BITSS.org. The BITSS blog was launched a year ago. It's gotten 27,000 visits since then, and we're at a point now where we're at a steady state of over 1,500 unique visitors a month visiting the blog. So that's a community of people who are actively engaged in these topics, and BITSS.org provides a forum for them to have a dialogue about what the right practices are, to learn about the latest research and the latest techniques. Beyond BITSS blog, there's also been a lot of movement and discussion among BITSS membership about best practices, and some of that is currently coming together in a manual of best practices that BITSS is drafting. And my colleague, Dr. Garrett Christensen, is going to be presenting that manual tomorrow at the research seminar. So for those of you who are going to be around tomorrow, we really look forward to getting feedback on that and moving forward in really crystallizing a set of practices that we think can make a difference in improving scientific integrity. The third part of BITSS's mission relates to adoption of these new strategies and new tools, and fostering the adoption of these new norms. And actually, over the last year, a bunch of you were at the meeting last year, and some of our activities on fostering adoption were more aspirational. But this has been a big focus of activity for the BITSS network over the last year. Of course, even if we've figured out what we think the best practices are, if no one's using them, we're not going to have much impact. So getting people to use the latest practices is really critical. And our activity in this area has actually taken a few different forms. We've put a lot of effort into training the next generation of scholars. And the idea behind this focus for BITSS is if we can inform and energize young scholars about tools that will actually help with the transparency of their own research, so they can bring that into their workflow, that they can bring that into just the essence of the research they do, we can have a lasting impact. We're going to change the way that they do their work. So this sort of training has taken a couple forms. The most important one was last summer. We had the first BITSS Summer Institute in Research Transparency. It was held here at Berkeley. A number of people in the room actually lectured as part of the Summer Institute. We had over 30 young scholars participate, and they heard lectures from many leaders in the field on key transparency and reproducibility topics. The 30-something scholars, again, were from 5 or 6 different social science disciplines. They were from over a dozen countries. And this is a really important way to train the next generation. One of the really interesting consequences of that training was just since June, since the Summer Institute in June, we know of at least 2 cases, 2 of those scholars who have gone back to their home institutions and developed short courses on research transparency to teach their colleagues and other students. So, these ideas are spreading, and training the next generation is a great way to promote that. So we're going to have the Summer Institute again in 2015. We're going to have it here in Berkeley. It's going to be even bigger, even better. It's joint with IPCSR and ICPSR. If you're interested in it, or some of your students are interested in it, again, it's going to be week-long training. We'd love for you to participate. So keep your eyes open for an email blast, or check out bits.org to get information about the Summer Institute. But it was a great success last year. Another development, very local to Berkeley, is actually this upcoming term, this spring, I'll be teaching a PhD level class, an interdisciplinary PhD level class on research transparency methods for social science. And that's, unusual. There aren't too many of those classes out there, but it's something we're really excited about, and there's been a lot of interest and enrollment already in the class. So we're developing curriculum and content that we'll be putting online that we'd love to share with everybody here. And the online materials piece is obviously very important going forward. We're working to get more content online to help to facilitate teaching transparency methods. Also, all the material from last summer's Summer Institute is already online. The lectures, the materials, the exercises. So any of you who are thinking of maybe grabbing some content or some slides or a discussion of a particular paper in a course of your own can access that. And that information is on the BITSS.org website, the online materials. Another area of activity has been work to try to shape and change journal policies. We've done some work on this, really working very closely with the Center for Open Science, one of our key partners on a number of different activities. The Center for Open Science hosted a meeting in Virginia last month that brought together leading editors from across disciplines to speak very concretely about the types of policies they could adopt to enhance transparency of the research published in their journals. In terms of the way forward, just to give you a sense of some of our plans and some of our aspirations, we're not sort of funded for this yet, but one of the things we'd really like to do to raise the profile and the prominence of scholars who are in the forefront of the field of research transparency is actually develop BITSS Innovator Prizes for young scholars who are adopting and developing the latest tools, and for faculty who are developing new course material and teaching content, maybe online or in the classroom, that really advances research transparency. So that's sort of the way forward, or one of the next steps of things that we'd like to do as a network. And there's a number of other areas that we're excited about, where we think there's a lot of potential to keep pushing the agenda forward. I just want to close in my intro comments to just step back for a second about why I'm here, just personally, and one of the reasons why I've found that these issues of research transparency are so important, really based on a research experience of my own. About 5 years ago, I was working with colleagues, Kate Casey and Rachel Glenister, on a field project in Sierra Leone. And we had started working in Sierra Leone after the Civil War there. We were working with the government to try to understand how to reform local institutions to make them work better in Sierra Leone, to make them more inclusive and more democratic, to try to get more women involved in their deliberations, to try to build social capital. So it was a very ambitious agenda, but the government didn't want a repeat of the Civil War. So they wanted to go in and carry out some serious reform of village government. And so we worked with them, and there were donors at the World Bank who were advocating what was called a community-driven development reform. And there's reforms like this actually in dozens of countries, and they're really an attempt to make village institutions more accountable. And we got involved in part because we were working on a randomized evaluation of this reform. They were working in hundreds of villages in these 2 different districts of Sierra Leone. And we set up a randomized experiment. We collected really detailed data on all these measures of inclusion, female participation in governance, outcomes for marginalized youth, all these things the government felt may have triggered the Civil War. So everybody really was very concerned about reforming local government, carried out this data collection. We did one thing, though, before we got the data for the evaluation, is we wrote up a pre-analysis plan. We basically publicly registered our analysis plan. And it was one of the early pre-analysis plans in economics. We did that for a number of reasons. A, we knew that similar analysis plans were sometimes done in medicine. We thought it was really rigorous. We wanted to sort of advance the agenda in economics. That was part of it. We were also a little concerned about the politics of the situation. So one thing that we did is we shared our pre-analysis plan with government of Sierra Leone partners, with World Bank partners who were funding the project, and got their feedback. Initially, they thought, when we shared our analysis plan with them before we had done our follow-up survey, and they said, wait a minute, why don't you ask about these additional topics? Why don't you add in these questions? Sure, okay, we'll add in those questions. And basically they helped us enrich the evaluation, and eventually they signed off on the pre-analysis plan. They said, okay, this is a good test of what we're interested in. Well, what ended up happening is when the results came in, we found that this community-driven development project had no measurable impact on any of these outcomes that they cared about. Women weren't speaking up in meetings more. Youth weren't running for office. Village councils weren't any more democratic. There was no more social capital, no matter how we measured it. Nothing changed across these just scores and scores of measures. Well, that was valuable. Our partners weren't very happy with us. They weren't very happy about the research. People had really invested for years in this program. Politicians had made their career trumpeting this program. There were officials in the World Bank who had really, this was a black eye for them, that the program had no impact. Having a pre-analysis plan made a really big difference. No one could go back later on and say, we looked at things wrong. No one could, none of our partners could go back later on and sort of cherry pick one or two outcomes that suggested there might be an impact, because the pre-analysis plan very clearly said what the measures were, and they'd agreed to that. Since then, we've shared the data from this project with our partners, with the research community. It's up on Dataverse. Thousands of people have downloaded it. So other people can check our work too and make sure that everything's crystal clear in terms of the analysis. So doing work in this kind of transparent way was important. It wasn't just important in getting the right answer. It was important in dealing with political pressure. It was important in dealing with social pressure. It was important in being able to tell the truth. And I think all of us as researchers, part of our ethic, our values as researchers, something we aspire to is being even-handed and telling the truth and getting the right information out there and not being subject to pressure. And I feel like transparent practices for me personally were really critical in allowing us to do that and deal with what was actually a politically very dangerous situation so that we got the right answers in the hands of policymakers. And if that research means that funding in Sierra Leone isn't spent on community-driven development, but it's spent on so many of the other dire needs in Sierra Leone, from education to health to water to Ebola, et cetera, then that's a really valuable impact of these practices. So that's part of why I'm here. I think from our speakers this afternoon, we're going to hear about a lot of other stories and a lot of other motivations and a lot of other tools.